Welcome to this week's edition of the Eplerwood International Vlog. We have a special edition for this particular week because we had a long visit from Keith Vinson, CEO of Wilderness Safaris at Harvard about a month ago. Keith joined us for an interview, but he also joined us to teach a class at Harvard Extension and to continue his process of allowing us to interview him and his peers as part of a new Harvard Business School case study that we will be publishing in 2020. This all adds up to a really exciting opportunity to learn how Wilderness Safaris has been able to document their performance using integrated annual reporting, which is not only a triple bottom line, but even includes a quadruple bottom line for culture in order to ensure that the many indigenous people that his company works with are not suffering from the impacts of safari tourism. This company takes their metrics really seriously. And from our point of view at Eplerwood International, they stand as one of the most well-documented ecotourism companies in the world. They are now, for this reason, attracting a lot of interest in ecotourism and in the field of social and environmental and conservation finance. It's exciting to see that firms like the RISE Fund, which have on their board Bono and Richard Branson, are now investing in Wilderness Safaris. So let's hear from Keith Vinson as to why they are taking so much interest.
I think it's a wonderful thing because I think it opened up the eyes of some of the other big trust funds or funds that are in the makings or want to follow suit. And I mean, there's 3 or 4 other funds that are now following into the social impact side. It was nice that RISE sort of led the charge, if you want to use that term, in getting into social impact. And by investing with us, it also widened the social impact side to include conservation and wildlife, which is where our love really lies. I mean, yes, we think we play an incredible role on the social impact side. In fact, a very big role. And I think it's something that's not talked about enough, is that one of the big roles that ecotourism can play is that we employ people from the rural community and very few from the urban community. You know, a lot of Africa suffers from urbanization as young people are trying to actually make a living and grow their opportunities. And in fact, people like ourselves are very capable of growing people's opportunities, but from a rural environment rather than from an urban environment. So I think we also play a role in cutting back on urbanization, which, you know, I think it's got to play a major social role in the form where people are actually ends up working closer to their actual home villages.
The company sees that it needs to lead by example.
First of all, is that we play a role, I think quite an important role in the ecotourism world of leading by example, and making sure that we do things that and hopefully lead the way into the future of ecotourism. So we take this role very seriously, and obviously because the repercussions of us doing it incorrectly are obviously vast. And I'm a big believer as lead by example, and if we can do things in a manner that is right for the product and for the country itself or whatever region we happen to be operating in, others will follow suit. And that leaves behind the right atmosphere for the long-term survivability of any business in the tourism side of the world.
Vinson argues that a high capital infrastructure approach to managing the growth of tourism, especially in high biodiversity areas or areas that need careful conservation of either cultural capital, social capital, or natural capital, should not be made quickly. His idea is that we need to grow slowly in areas that are sensitive and have high value. It's not a good idea to bring mass tourism quickly to places that could easily lose what is in fact the most valuable part of the travel and tourism experience. He recommends that you take it slowly in countries around the world that are still interested in introducing tourism to these highly fragile areas. Here's what Keith has to say.
There's many places where it can do that. And I think it's important for one countries and areas within a country or national parks within the country or let's call it hotspots for. There's many places where it can do that. And I think it's important for one countries and and areas within a country or national parks within the country or let's call it hotspots for. There's many places where it can do that. And I think it's important for one countries and areas within a country or national parks within the country or let's call it hotspots for. There's many places where it can do that. And I think it's important for one countries and areas within a country or national parks within the country or let's call it hotspots for. There's many places where it can do that. And I think it's important for one countries and areas within a country or national parks within the country or let's call it hotspots for. There's many places where it can do that. And I think it's important for one countries and areas within a country or national parks within the country or let's call it hotspots for. There's many places where it can do that. And I think it's important for one countries and areas within a country or national parks within the country.
Keith suggests that in Africa, Rwanda offers one of the best examples of how to manage the growth of tourism.
Rwanda is a standout of great stewardship of many. You know, they took the plunge and they took some big pressure in the international travel world when they raised the gorilla fees from $750 to $1,500 per permit. Having said that, with call it 60% of the actual tourist arrivals, they've made an enormous amount more money than they did when they were selling it at $750 with very low priced accommodation. And now they've got, firstly, it's followed with about $70-odd million worth of capital investment in really what's bear in mind there's only 96 permits available a day. So you don't need an awful lot of beds to service those 96 permits. So that if you take the capital invested in the country per bed and the price of the gorilla permit, they've literally increased their revenue into that area by about 40%.
He particularly points to the progress that Rwanda is making with women, not only as employees, but also as business owners and as government leaders, where they are now 50% of the parliament.
The advancement of women in the workforce is quite spectacular. So it's probably one of the standout ones. And if I remember correctly, is Rwanda is one of the few African countries where I think 52% of parliament is actually women. And we see it in our workforce where our workforce in the camps itself are just over 50% of women. So I mean that's a major stride, and they work very hard at that.
What is fascinating is that Vincent tells us that ecotourism is garnering a lot more attention around the world right now among investors. Social and environmental and conservation impact investors are all looking for just this type of enterprise that can show and document their conservation results. This is good news, not only for the field of ecotourism, but of course for the field of conservation and also social and environmental management around the world.
I've got no doubt that it's going to grow. I mean, that's the field I play in, and being in a whole bunch of travel shows around the world. Ecotourism and sustainability are the key words that everyone's chucking around at the moment, and that's going to have an effect, and it's getting a lot more airtime across the world, across the planet, and a role that we can play not just from a conservation perspective, but from a climate perspective, in protecting forests from being deforested, and all those kind of plays. People, you can have philanthropy to stop some of the deforestation in the lungs of the world, be it the Congo Basin or be it the Amazon for that matter. But at the end of the day, imagine what we could do if we've actually got a sustainable commercial business model that can actually sustain that as well. And that will give it longevity in the long run.
His argument is that ecotourism and conservation enterprises have a very important role to play right now in the conservation of our globe's most fragile ecosystems, such as the Amazon, the Okavango Delta, and other areas of Africa that may be even emerging from civil war. This is the moment when impact investors seem to be coming together to understand the role that nature and conservation and ecotourism can play in avoiding destruction of our natural ecosystems.
I think we've only just seen the real beginning of real ecotourism, and I'm really excited about the opportunities in the future as more and more countries open up across the globe. You know, even to the parts of, if you look at parts of Eastern China, with things like what they might be able to offer, and you talk about the Himalayas and snow leopards, and you talk about places like Siberia, and you talk about South America, and you talk about Asia, let alone Africa. I mean, Africa has got an immense amount still to do itself. But even to the point of North America, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of these countries have lagged behind in ecotourism, but you know, North America's got the will, got the capital available to it, and I'm seeing more and more people talking about it. And everywhere I go in the world, it seems to be that these opportunities are being brought forward by governments, by private enterprise, and eventually, I think it could easily quadruple in the next 3 to 5 years.
Our approach at Eplerwood International is really following the lead of companies like Wilderness Safaris. We see via our cooperation with Harvard Business School and the studies that we've done there that this type of scaling up of conservation enterprise through ecotourism is having really important impacts and is providing opportunities for people in rural areas around the world. This is an important role to play, both socially, environmentally, and economically, that sustainable tourism can play. While it has been undervalued and has seen a variety of missteps due to the lack of understanding of scalable enterprise, we are now seeing a new type of scalable conservation enterprise that could be expanded dramatically around the world. This will depend on having the type of integrated annual report metrics that Wilderness Safaris offers investors, and working with the investment community as well to make sure that their metrics are compatible with the new and exciting enterprises that seek to perform this scale of conservation in future. Thanks a lot for joining us for this week's edition of the Eplerwood International Vlog.